The Bengals have officially put one practice into week one, and we've got some injury updates and major storylines to talk about as we start to ramp up for the Bengals trip to Cleveland.
You are Locked On Bengals, your daily Cincinnati Bengals podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bengals fans, and welcome to another episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast. I'm your host, Jake Lisco. He's your host, James Rapien. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network here on Locked On Bengals, bringing you coverage of your team every day. And if you're new to the show, make sure you subscribe on YouTube or anywhere you're listening to this podcast. And that'll make it really easy for you to join the First Listen Club. Everyone who makes us your first listen every day and makes us a part of your life, we really appreciate all of you. In addition to the everydayers who don't miss an episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast. And this isn't a time of year to miss an episode. It's week one. It's the most hyped time of year. Maybe outside of the draft would be a competitor for us. Free agency opening up, that's another competitor. But the most excitement around this team at this stage in its team building cycle is got to be week one and then the playoff run that's coming this winter. This episode of Locked On Bengals brought to you by BirdDogs. Go to birddogs.com/LockedOnNFL or enter promo code LockedOnNFL for a water bottle with any order. You won't want to take your bird dogs off, we promise you. James, let's talk injury updates. Zach Taylor spoke with you sitting near where you're sitting right now at Paycor Stadium, gave some injury updates on Joe Burrow, on Chidobe Awuzie, on Joseph Ossai, and of course, we start with the franchise. Still waiting for his deal, by the way, as of time of recording, about 4 p.m. on Monday. Joe Burrow, according to Zach Taylor, still considered somebody they're going to take day-to-day with his calf injury.
Yeah, day-to-day, and didn't want to declare him ready to go for Sunday. I think he's going to play Sunday. All signs point to that happening. Zach Taylor said he was encouraged by what he saw from Burrow out there again. So now we're talking about 3 straight practices. I talked to Irv Smith Jr. in the locker room, and he seems to think the chemistry is awesome and that they're ready to go. So he's confident there when it comes to Burrow and that he's hitting on all cylinders. So I get it. Zach Taylor might not want to declare it. Heck, we may see Joe Burrow in the injury report this week, but it's certainly not a concern in my book. I think he's going to be out there. Now, I will say this, and it's interesting. It's just a note that I will mention because it's note season, especially as you mentioned the contract aspect of things. I did not see Joe Burrow in the locker room during the open media portion of things right after the Bengals practice. And normally he does roll in there at some point. Normally we see him. I did not see him. That doesn't mean he wasn't there. Maybe he rolled through and he went to get treatment, or he jumped in the cold tub or had a meeting. There's plenty of reasons why he wouldn't be in there, but I didn't see him. So who knows? Maybe he's talking with his agent about this new deal. There we go. I'll set the world on fire with that speculation.
Yeah, it's one of those reasons that he could be upstairs signing a contract, James.
Yeah. Maybe that's it. Well, I have a pen if he needs it. I'm still here. So if he needs a pen, I have one. I'm in the news conference room, Joe. Just come find me. I'm saying this like he can hear me right now, like we're live streaming. But
why aren't we live streaming is the question for moments like this.
Could you imagine? That would be the best moment in our podcast history.
That'd be hilarious.
And most. But I do expect Joe Burrow to play week one. And obviously that's great news for a variety of reasons.
Brian Callahan last week when he talked said that he felt like the Bengals had a good plan for Joe Burrow to get ready for week one. Zach Taylor playing it a little coy. No reason to give additional information to the Cleveland Browns when you don't have to, but you can bet that Jim Schwartz and that Cleveland Browns defense is preparing for Joe Burrow. On the other side of the ball, Kevin Stefanski and that Cleveland Browns offense ought to be preparing for Chidobe Awuzie. A very cut and dried answer from Zach Taylor when asked if Chido was going to play in week one. The answer being yes. Yes, he is. And some folks have still been wondering about this. I don't know if you've had these questions, James, but I've had some asking if we're just assuming that Chidobe Awuzie will be ready for week one, and we have been. And it sounds like our assumption was correct. We've seen him ramping up throughout training camp and to a much greater degree in the last couple of weeks. Chido should be ready to go, according to Zach Taylor, for week 1.
Huge. This is huge for a bunch of reasons. Obviously, it's something that our listeners have known about our opinion. I mean, I remember saying in OTAs, like, this man is planting, jumping, moving his hips, flipping his hips without any kind of protection on that knee. I mean, screw a brace. Like, he didn't even have a sleeve or a wrap or anything. It's like, oh, this dude's going to be ready. And he looks ready. He looks the part. And Zach Taylor with just huge, huge praise for Chido on Monday.
Arguably one of the smartest corners in the league. I haven't coached every corner, but he's just got those instincts, that awareness. Physically talented, physically as talented as anyone. And so there's a lot that he brings to the table that people see and people don't see, And so it's good to get him back, just him back in the huddle, him back out there taking reps. He really makes those receivers work for everything that they get. I know that they would tell you that. And so he's a great weapon to have back there.
Yeah, he's a great weapon to have back there. He's certainly someone that it's just a major piece. And you look at this secondary, Jake, and I think that's one of the question marks nationally. If you have Chido and he's like 90% of Chido to start the season, I don't really have many concerns about the secondary. I think they're going to be really good from the jump. Cam Taylor-Britt, I expect a lot out of him. We know about Mike Hilton. We'll talk more about him in a second. The two safeties. Point is I think Chido, having him back, is just such a huge thing for this defense, because it was a question mark, even though we were pretty bullish on it. And so I'm excited to see him out there. And he's playing in Cleveland, where he suffered the injury on Halloween.
Yeah, it's a big shot in the arm for the defense. It will be different in the secondary, even with Chido back. There are different safeties. Cam Taylor-Britt is not the person who started at corner for the Bengals last year, early in the year, to begin the year. That was Eli Apple. Eli Apple no longer with the team, but that's a very easy argument to say you've improved at that spot, especially with the summer that Cam Taylor-Britt had. So if your other three corners are roughly the same, and you're going against an improved Cleveland Browns receiving core with the addition of Elijah Moore, what a boost. And Cedric Tillman, by the way, 3rd-round pick, made some noise for the Browns in the preseason. Wouldn't be surprising to see him get onto the field in week 1 either. Just an important piece of continuity for this team to have Chidobe Awuzie back on the field at cornerback. The other big injury update, Joseph Ossai, still not on IR, on the rehab field. Pretty suggestive at this point that Ossai will not need the IR. Zach Taylor also described Ossai as day-to-day in his press conference on Monday. Different kind of day-to-day, I think, than Joe Burrow. We talked about that before we started recording, James. But overall, I think there is significant news here for Ossai, that he's avoided the IR, that he's out there on the rehab field already, just a couple of weeks now, a week plus removed from a high ankle sprain that has, for anywhere from a 3 to 12 week recovery time, depending on the grade of the sprain. So sounds like he maybe got off on the lighter side here, and hopefully that's the case.
Yeah, hopefully. And they do have until Saturday to do the IR move. It doesn't feel like it's going to happen, but they still could, and it wouldn't cost them any more weeks. So we'll see. But it was good to see him in a jersey at practice, and who knows, maybe you get him back week 2. I don't expect him to play this week. Now, maybe he surprises me. I don't expect that, but could he suit up and be ready to go maybe for the Ravens or the Monday night game against the Rams? I think that is more realistic today than I thought it was a few days ago. So that's really good news for number 58. It
would be great to see him get back on the field, anticipating a significant year for Joseph Ossai as a contributor. He just needs to stay healthy. That has been a challenge for him at times. Various random injuries occurring. His foot got caught in the infamous FedEx Field turf and had a little rotation occur. That's what leads to that high ankle sprain, but hopefully the Bengals have him back sooner than later. 2023 captains announced. Talk about continuity. We'll get into the Bengals 2023 captains coming up next.
Today's show is brought to you by Bird Dogs. I love Bird Dogs. Bird Dogs, they're such a big part of my day-to-day life, and it's quickly become my go-to shorts, my go-to pants. And when it comes to covering the Bengals, well, I wear Bird Dogs almost every day, including today, by the way, here at Paycor Stadium. Why? Well, they're comfortable. They keep you dry in the summer. I wore them throughout training camp. So did Jake Lisco when he was in town. They're perfect for any occasion, whether you're covering training camp, whether you're going golfing. Maybe you're thinking like, yeah, but what do you do in November, December when you're out at practice, James, and it gets chilly? Their joggers are the most comfortable joggers in the game. You need to get in on Bird Dogs and thank me later, because they're the shorts, pants, anything in between, the apparel that you need. So go to birddogs.com/LockedOnNFL today, or enter promo code LockedOnNFL at checkout for a free Bird Dogs water bottle with your order. This is a quality bottle, by the way, that's going to keep that water nice and cold all summer long, all fall long. And if you're like me, I got to put ice in my water. It's a big deal. So birddogs.com/LockedOnNFL for a free water bottle at checkout. Thank me later. You won't want to take your Bird Dogs off. We promise you.
Cincinnati Bengals 2023 captains are the same? Mostly. There is one exception. There is one exception to the list. There is one change from 2022, and building suspense here. I don't know why. And that's with the departure of Von Bell. Obviously, there is one new defensive captain. And let's start with Mike Hilton. The new captain, first-time captain. Love the story for Mike Hilton. Everybody knows the story. Came up as an undrafted free agent, quickly carved out a role for himself, gets a 4-year deal, gets that financial security, and now in his 3rd year with the Cincinnati Bengals, a captain. And this could have happened sooner if there weren't so many other great choices for that captaincy last year. Makes a ton of sense. Really happy for Mike Hilton. Just a great story, great guy, really gracious podcast host as well when he joined us last year. So congratulations to Mike Hilton.
Yeah, he's deserving. And I'm not shocked at all. It really, I think about it, I'm like, man, I'm surprised he wasn't a captain last year, right? And you get it with Von Bell. He was such a leader in that secondary as well. But Mike Hilton makes a ton of sense. Great decision. All of these guys are voted on by the players, and really top to bottom, they all make a lot of sense. And for Mike Hilton, though, you're right. It's been a heck of a story. He's become such a huge part of that defense. He's obviously a leader. I know for a fact, young guys, Dax Hill, Jordan Battle, Tyson Anderson, they look to Mike for guidance, and he's certainly the one they go to. So I love it for him. I think it makes a ton of sense. And I hope he balls out this year. Like I said, it's one of the reasons why I'm not super concerned about the secondary. I just think the veterans that they have in that room, it might not be as veteran laden as it was last year, but they're going to be able to stabilize things and get the most out of the young guys. And Mike Hilton's a big part of that.
Mike Hilton and the other guy we've talked about, Chidobe Awuzie, some great veterans here. And Nick Scott, a veteran, new to the Bengals, but a veteran nonetheless. Interesting note from Ben Baby before we get to the rest of the Bengals captains, because I'm not watching other teams' captain announcements the way that I'm watching for Bengals captain announcements, but Ben retweeting that Jesse Bates is a captain in his first year down in Atlanta. So good for Jesse Bates as well. But on back to the topic of Bengals captains, on the offensive side of the ball, same as last year. No special teams captains, but on the offensive side of the ball, Joe Burrow, Ted Karras, Joe Mixon. Burrow and Karras, no-brainers. Mixon earning this honor again shows you what his teammates think of him, regardless of what has happened off the field, in the courtroom, where he was declared innocent by a judge. That didn't matter. Team still behind Joe Mixon, still gets that captaincy nod, and Joe Burrow and Ted Karras, two clear leaders in that offensive room.
For sure. And no real surprises. I think, to me, it makes a ton of sense, obviously, with Karras. From day one, he came in and kind of became a leader, instant veteran. We know the impact he's had on the community, like right? Joe Burrow, we know about him. And Joe Mixon is as well liked in that locker room as anyone. So makes a ton of sense for all three. And then on defense, you knew it had to be a couple of defensive linemen in there. And you could go, I think you could go with some other guys, but obviously there's no one, I don't think there's anyone more important than DJ Reader on that defense when he's playing at a high level. And they're going to be counting on him all season long, certainly on Sunday against Nick Chubb. And Sam Hubbard, he's coming off of a career year. Like, captain last year, coming off of a career year. We'll see if he can one-up himself and be even better this year. But obviously he played his tail off last season.
A couple of guys that have been with the team for quite some time now that have been in the league. In DJ Reader's case, longer than he's been with the team. Makes a ton of sense for these guys to be named captains again. They're clear leaders on the defensive side of the ball, all three. And you're right, there are a few other candidates waiting in the wings if the Bengals need some future captains. And I was surprised. One of my guesses when we talked about this, I hadn't seen the list yet, was Logan Wilson. Not a captain yet, but I think that's just a matter of time in his career as he accumulates years and experience with this team that Logan Wilson will be a captain in the near future. But great list. The Bengals have great player leadership. And Zach Taylor and his coaching staff talk a lot about the culture that they've created or helped to create. A lot of that is also on the players that they've brought in. And these players are great examples of the kind of people who contribute in the community the way so many of them do and lead in the locker room the way they do, that leads to that tight-knit relationship or weave of tight-knit relationships, really, that makes up the Bengals locker room.
No doubt. And you're right, Logan Wilson's one. I think in the next year or two, Cam Taylor-Britt, I could totally see emerging as a captain. I mean, there are guys like that are obvious candidates down the line, but they have a really good group. Who knows? Maybe T. Higgins or Jamar Chase down the line could emerge as that. I get why they're not this year, though. I could totally see in a year or two. I mean, heck, those guys are still 24, 23. Like, they're young. And so hopefully they combine for more touchdowns than their age this season. But let's get into it, Jake. It's week 1. And so let's discuss some of the major storylines, starting with the top cornerback in the on the Cleveland Browns roster. Denzel Ward, will he play? Will he not play? That's a question mark going into Sunday. We'll get to that and more coming up next.
Like you said, James, week 1 is here. And if you're ready to get ready for the NFL season, check out the incredible offers at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5. That's it, just $5 to get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Seems like a pretty good deal. In addition to that, all customers who bet $5 will get $100 off NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. So if you need a way to watch Bengals games, that's 2 birds, 1 stone right there if you're into doing the sorts of things that the #1 sportsbook in America can do for you. Now's the best time to join FanDuel. The app is easy to use, and you can be on everything from spreads to player props and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season with an offer you won't want to miss. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL.
All right, let's dive into, to me, what's going to be outside of like Burrow contract talks, which we hit on a ton on our Monday show. So check that out if you're looking for that. Naturally, since there hasn't been much there, we didn't discuss it much on today's show. But Denzel Ward dealing with another concussion. I believe it's his 5th concussion. 4th or 5th?
I think it's his 4th in the NFL.
4th in the NFL. Okay. Didn't practice on Monday. We will see. Hasn't practiced, hasn't done anything since suffering it in that final preseason game for the Browns. Why Kevin Stefanski put one of the best cornerbacks in the NFL on the field in a meaningless last preseason game, that's a whole nother question, but I'll rip him for it because that was just stupid. That said, hopefully Denzel's okay, but this is certainly a storyline anytime you're facing the Bengals wide receivers, because Denzel Ward has been a Bengal killer to a degree. He's been really good, a thorn in Joe Burrow's side. Obviously the pick 6 against Jamar Chase, where Chase took the blame, but it was a bad throw, bad decision by Burrow, whatever you want to say. Not having Denzel Ward would be a huge loss for the Browns. And I think it's 50-50 at this point. I hope he's okay. Hopefully he plays. But as of right now, I'm not sure he's going to.
Yeah, and I talked with Jake Burns, who covers the Browns, about Denzel Ward. There's growing concern about this concussion issue for Ward in Cleveland. 4 concussions in his relatively short NFL career. He's been in the league. This is going to be his, 6th year? 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 20. Yeah, 6th year.
Mm-hmm.
4 concussions. And it's taking him a little bit longer as they pile up to recover. Like you said, the number one concern here is you hope he's okay. You hope he gets back on the field, avoids concussions for the rest of his career, doesn't become anything more than what it has been so far, because he's a great young player, and concussions for any player in the NFL are not something I'd wish on anybody. But in terms of the impact on week 1, certainly something that bears watching. The big threat with the Cleveland Browns, and we'll talk more about this later this week as we get into the preview and we get into the crossover episode and all these things, is they've rebuilt their defensive line, and they brought in Jim Schwartz, and Jim Schwartz wants to rush 4 guys. You're going to hear us talk about this for the rest of the week. He wants to get pressure with 4.
Sure.
He wants to run all sorts of crazy creative stuff with those 4 guys up front. And he wants to get guys into coverage. Historically, he's been a cover 1, cover 3, not too high kind of defense, wants to run more man. I don't know if you're going to see those things against the Bengals. Again, we'll talk more about this later this week. But if you lose Denzel Ward, means Greg Newsome probably has to go play outside again instead of playing in the nickel. So you got Martin Emerson, Greg Newsome outside, a couple of very physical, handsy, grabby corners, which is its own can of worms. Good players, but somewhat penalty prone, I think, to both of them. And then you're forced to put probably Mike Ford or unproven rookie Cameron Mitchell into the slot to replace Greg Newsome. And what you can do in terms of creativity with your secondary, I think, is diminished in terms of disguise, in terms of changing looks, because you don't have your number 1 corner out there. It might be a bit of a handcuff for Schwartz, who isn't known for necessarily his flexibility in the secondary in the first place. A little bit of, I'm going to do what I'm going to do with that unit. And when you have the guys for it, which you look at the starters for the Browns, they have the guys for it, it can work pretty well. But if they have to change personnel, you have a slot that you could target and exploit with the veteran who's really good in Tyler Boyd, who we haven't talked about a ton, but is certainly a viable weapon for this offense. If there's focus on the outside receivers, get T. Higgins into the slot, something that we've seen in training camp. There's a hole that opens up in the defense, and that's why it's so important and bears watching, and it's such an important factor for this week 1 game.
It's huge. I mean, it's huge. I mean, football wise, when you're the Browns and you're looking at this team, it starts with Joe Burrow, but you instantly go to Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. Like every defensive coordinator in the league, that's how they're going to go. Every time, it doesn't matter how great the offense is. It doesn't matter how many yards Joe Mixon runs for 1 week or scores touchdown. It doesn't matter. That's where it starts. Burrow, the receivers. And so having a guy like Denzel Ward, it's still a concern, but it doesn't have to be as much of one. And now it's like, oh, you're right. I mean, it opens up a hole somewhere, and maybe it's that nickel spot. You're right. Or maybe it's just the fact that I know Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, even Tyler Boyd, they're going to be up for this game because they know that the Browns secondary has gotten them at times and has made it competitive and has won their fair share of reps. So I hope Denzel Ward does play, to be very, very clear. 1, for his health and the player and all of those things. 2, I think it will be really entertaining to see if he can guard Jamar Chase and to see if he can go toe-to-toe with T. Higgins. And so we'll see. Hopefully he does. But that, to me, is probably the biggest storyline going into Sunday from an injury standpoint. Obviously, the Burrow contract is separate. The other thing would be Jonah Williams and Orlando Brown Jr. versus Myles Garrett, offensive line, defensive line. We're going to talk about it a ton this week, but that's the other major storyline outside of that, like Joe Burrow being ready, last year's week 1, him really struggling at the start of the game against Pittsburgh. Okay, fine. I don't expect that. I expect him to be normal Joe Burrow on Sunday. Whether that's fair or not, that's my expectation.
Going to be a big litmus test for the Browns overall, I think. How does their remade team, I mean, a lot of new faces by comparison, especially in the trenches, and they add Elijah Moore, Juan Thornhill, a new face in that secondary as well. Gonna be interesting for the Browns from that point of view. Maybe get a taste of how quality the Browns really are based on the way this game goes. Although, like I said in yesterday's show, James, week 1, and I've said it for years, going to keep saying it, week 1 is weird. The Bengals going to Cleveland is also often weird. So hopefully it's not too weird in week 1, because weird is sometimes uncomfortable. I'm rooting for a good football game, like you. Entertaining, solid football game, and the Bengals need to get a good start in their division. You can't go 3-3 in the division this year. I think the Bengals on paper look clearly better than the Browns from a roster perspective to me. So it's going to be an important game, but like you said, like we've said, we have all week to talk about that. Real quick before we get out of here, James, forgot in the injury portion, or rather ran out of time really in the injury portion of the show to start, Trayveon Williams update that you mentioned you wanted to hit on.
Yeah, Trayveon Williams telling reporters that he's 1,000% better, feeling 1,000% better. I know Charlie Clifford had that update, and Trayveon's been practicing. Zach Taylor offering up some positive signs as well. So that's another storyline. You want to talk about storylines, and we will hit on it this week. 3rd down running back, passing down running back. Who will it be? Will they keep 4 active? It's something we will monitor, because it looks like as of now, all 4 guys are going to be healthy. Mixon, Chris Evans, Trayveon Williams, and rookie Chase Brown.
And we talked about that for like 10 minutes last week in an episode, because it's pretty unclear from the outside looking in where they're going to put trust in that 3rd active running back. But if Trayveon's 100%, that definitely swings me toward your perspective that you shared last week, where Chase Brown is the other guy they would want up as a running back. And if they feel like Trayveon Williams can get them 15 snaps, Chase Brown would be the 3rd guy. I think no doubt about that. It was really if Trayveon's not 100% and they feel like they need a backup for those passing downs, would that be the path for Chris Evans? And who knows, that 4th running back could just be active. That would be a development that we'll continue to watch as well. But we have the rest of the week here to prepare for week 1. The Bengals off on Tuesday, back at practice for regular practice week on Wednesday. That's when we'll get our first injury report of the week. Joe Burrow would traditionally talk to the media on Wednesday. So as we're watching for that contract, that is certainly an event to circle. We've got crossover Thursday coming up in addition to a game preview later this week. So plenty of good stuff coming up on Locked On Bengals for week 1. Until next time, thanks for listening to this episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast. Hoo day, and have a good one.